What can we say after Kentucky basketball's 95-76 win over Louisville? Other than that, the Wildcats are just simply built different.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be recapping Kentucky basketball's 95-76 win over the Louisville Cardinals. We pretty much had this one written down and pegged directly from the get-go in our breakdown. This was not a shocking game. The Wildcats got out and ran, played very well. I think on the offensive end of the floor, played well as well. Defensively, a lot of things to talk about. Positives, negatives, momentum. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available in all platforms. If you have not subscribed to the show already, I would really appreciate it if you went ahead and did so. Let's go ahead and break this one down. Like I mentioned, the final 95-76. This one was tightly contested for about, I think, 8 to 12 minutes, somewhere in there, and you heard it on the broadcast. If you were listening on ESPN, Coach Cal said heading into this one, he would not be shocked if Louisville hung around in this game for around that amount of time. And then the Wildcats just simply pulled away on offense. The first takeaway that I have from today's matchup, we're going to talk about the good, then we're going to talk about maybe some different criticisms. We don't have a ton on today's episode considering the margin of victory and what happened in this game. But the three-point defense of the Louisville Cardinals did not matter in this one. And you may say, Lance, why would it have mattered? Well, if you listen to our preview episode, or if you have a KenPom subscription, you would note, or if you just went and looked online, if you were just casually browsing, you would note that Louisville has a pretty good three-point defense. It's one of the better ones in the country. I believe it was top 35 in the nation heading into this contest. But when you look at the opponents that Louisville has played up until this point, not only have they not played a ton of good three-point shooting teams, they've also not played a ton of teams that rely on the three-point shot as much as Kentucky does statistically. And the numbers that I gave you in the preview episode, Louisville's top three opponents in three-point percentage win a combined 16 of 60, 26.6% against the Cards. But it's also worth noting that none of those three teams, DePaul, Pepperdine, and Texas, are in the top 50 or 150 of point distribution percentage from three. Point distribution essentially meaning what percentage of points are you getting from 3, 2, and from the foul line. And Kentucky, among those teams, relies pretty heavily on the three-point shot to get their points, even though Kentucky, in terms of what they do statistically all around, they are a pretty well-balanced offense in terms of how many actual points, not percentage of points, but how many points they get from inside the arc and from the foul line as well. They just simply happen to make such a high rate of threes that their point distribution is skewed a little bit heavy in that direction. And this one was just simply domination from the Wildcats from beyond the arc. You go and look at the stats from this game. Kentucky ended up shooting 48% from three for the game. They were shooting 53% at the end of the first half. They went 4 of 10 in the second half to finish the game at that 48% clip. And it was multiple players getting in on the action and knocking down some outside shots. Most notably, though, two individuals that we will get to here in a second, Tre Mitchell and Antonio Reeves, both knocking down 4 triples apiece. Reed Shepard with 2 in this contest, Adu Thiero, 1 of 2 from outside, and then Justin Edwards also knocked down a 3-point shot as well. Kentucky was raining it from downtown throughout this game, and you have to give credit to the way that they move the ball around in this offense. Something that we talked about in the preview episode about what Kentucky needs to do, how they should attack the Cardinals, is by making sure that they control themselves and they focus and don't sleepwalk through the first half. You can't allow, I want to say, you can't allow, I think, that UNC Wilmington game to happen again this season, at least the first half of that game. And that may sound pretty dramatic. Obviously, this team is going to slip up. It's not going to be perfect, but you cannot allow the lack of aggression and confusion on the offensive end be what you are for an entire half again in a contest for the rest of the season. And Kentucky was battling back and forth with Louisville, but I don't think it was because they were sleepwalking or confused on offense. Louisville just gave them everything that they had for those first 10, 12, maybe even 15 minutes of the first half, and then the Wildcats offense just kind of took over. They spaced very well. Whenever they had opportunities in transition, they consistently cashed in. According to the box score, they only have Kentucky with 11 fast break points, but the way that Kentucky was playing pace-wise in this game, it felt like they had a lot more than that with different guys, whether it be transition threes or slashing and cutting to the rim. Continuing to talk about this Kentucky offense in this game, by the way, something that we said in the preview episode, I feel like ended up being true. And the fact that Kentucky, I thought, would have some opportunities to take it to the rim aggressively and kind of give Louisville a taste of their own medicine, not necessarily seeking to draw fouls and then relying heavily on that, but actually taking it to the rim and I think scoring pretty consistently. And there was one guy that we saw doing that throughout the entire night, and that was Antonio Reeves, and he absolutely exploded in the first half of this contest. He also finished with a plus minus of 19. Antonio Reeves, brace yourself for the stat line, 30 points on 10 of 16 shooting, 4 of 5 from 3, 6 of 7 from the line, and that is what Antonio Reeves does best. He is a scorer. You look at the rest of the stats here for Reeves. He had 1 rebound, 2 assists, and 2 steals. Solid 2 steals there. But, I mean, that's what he does. When you look at the box score, he's been much better as a rebounder this season as opposed to the past, I think, 2, both between Kentucky and his final year at Illinois State. But Reeves is consistently, I think, producing in one way or another on the court, even whenever he's not having a solid shooting night. You have seen him do different things in the box score, but this is, like I said, this is what he does best. He knocks down his outside shots, and this year, I don't know if it's because he's just decided to become more aggressive or if it's something conditioning-wise and development-wise that he did this offseason. I don't know if it's a mindset or if it's the conditioning or both, but he has really excelled when it comes to driving down the lane and then finishing at the rim instead of settling consistently for different things he did at Illinois State and different things he did in his first year with UK, settling for these floaters. And he can hit the floaters. Don't get me wrong. He can hit those consistently. But he has done such a great job just taking it at opponents and then not just taking it at them, actually scoring, finishing those drives to the basket. I've been very impressed with some of the really smooth moves that Antonio Reeves has put on, not just in this contest, but in this season as a whole. 30 points earned, every single one of them was a great night, great night from Antonio Reeves. So I want to continue along here talking about some of the individual performances, the defense, maybe some of the negatives that we could take away from this contest. Before I dive into all of that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, all faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just simply another job board. They have a vast network of over 1 billion professionals, which makes it simply the best place to hire. And hiring is really easy when you have all of those quality candidates at LinkedIn. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses can get a qualified candidate within 24 hours at LinkedIn because they know that small businesses are wearing so many different hats, they might not have the time or resources to hire. But thankfully, with LinkedIn Jobs, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, continuing along here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. One more time, I really appreciate you guys making Locked On Kentucky your first listen. If you have not subscribed to the show, whether that be on the podcast feed, hello podcast listeners, don't get to ever consistently talk to you guys in the comments because YouTube has those and podcast does not. But I appreciate you guys. If you've not subbed on the podcast feed, would appreciate it if you did so. If you're listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, subscribe there as well. So, where should we go next? I think we should talk about the other individual that had a very solid scoring effort for the Wildcats tonight, and that was Tre Mitchell. Tre Mitchell, 18 points on 7 of 13 shooting, and at one point in the second half, it became shooting practice for Tre Mitchell, who finished 4 of 7 from beyond the arc, also had 12 rebounds, so a double-double here. He had an assist, 3 blocks, and 2 steals to go along with those 18 points. Another stat-stuffing night for the forward transfer from West Virginia. Tre Mitchell had a great game, I think, when not just scoring the basketball, not just rebounding the basketball, and the numbers don't show it here because he only has one assist, and it was really, really smooth. I can't remember who it was to, but it was a really nice pass from the top of the key. Mitchell is a great passer. He is a true, I think, triple threat on this team, rebounding, distributing, scoring, and you love that out of a guy that has that versatility to play between the 4 and the 5 spot. There were several different passes that I really liked in this game that didn't lead directly to baskets, obviously, because of the one assist, but he has, throughout the course of this season, proven to be a legitimate option as somebody who can handle the ball a little bit and then see the court and then get it to guys who can score. I've been very pleased with the way that Reeves has stepped up, Mitchell has stepped up at different points across these first 11 games for the Wildcats. Actually, now I believe Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, is 10-2. After that game against Louisville. No, 9-2. My bad. My apologies. For some reason, I feel like I'm getting a game ahead here, but Mitchell was the other player that obviously stood out on the scoreboard, and then I think stood out whenever you go and watch the game and watched how this one panned out. Really closed down on some of those rebounds aggressively as well. 10 of those rebounds defensive for Tre Mitchell. Really shut things down. Outside of Brandon Huntley Hatfield for the Cardinals, there was not a lot of consistent offense to be had. Sky Clark for the Cardinals had some good things happen, had some bad things happen. Was out there for quite some time. In fact, he played more minutes than anybody for the U of L, 36 minutes in total. He led the team with 20 points, but that was largely due in part to the fact that he had 11 free throw attempts, only made 6 of them. And I guess that's another interesting aspect of this one. We talked about the way that Louisville gets to the foul line and how aggressive they can be, and that's essentially all their offense is capable of consistently, and it showed. I mean, excuse me, if you go and look at this game, 25 field goals made, 22 free throws made of the 31 that they took, as opposed to Kentucky's 16, by the way, and then they were 4 of 17 from beyond the arc. So that's 22 points from the foul line. That is 12 points from outside the arc, and it just goes to show, statistically, I mean, they rely on the charity stripe almost more than anybody else in the country, and they don't really have much else to show for it. Mike James, 2 of 11 in this game. Tyler Johnson, the freshman, 0 of 6 in this one. Curtis Williams, 2 of 8 from the floor in this contest. They ended up shooting 42.4% from the floor overall. And if you go and look at Kentucky's defensive rating on KenPom, their adjusted efficiency, which we are continuing to monitor, they ended up dropping 2 spots. They were up to 44th, and then in between the past few days that we talked about the KenPom ratings, they dropped to 46th, and then they dropped to 48th after this contest, which is really interesting that they took another step back here after what I thought was a pretty solid defensive effort outside of maintaining things in front of Brandon Huntley Hatfield. I mean, I really did think that Kentucky held almost everyone in check, not named Sky Clark and Huntley Hatfield. Even Clark had some issues offensively and had some confusing shot attempts as well, and a couple of really confusing turnovers on top of that. But I thought Kentucky has, with Ugonna Onyenso, with Aaron Bradshaw in this lineup, they've played better defensively on that end of the floor. Now, I will say this, Bradshaw in this game, 4 fouls, only had 2 points. He had 4 rebounds as well in 21 minutes. By the way, Aaron Bradshaw, 1 block. Tre Mitchell had 3. Ugonna Onyenso had 2. 8 in total for the Wildcats on this afternoon. Onyenso finished with a plus-minus of plus 11. So missed his only shot, got a couple rebounds, got a couple blocks in 8 minutes. If he's going to continue to defensively be that strong and that limited amount of time, Kentucky will take those minutes. You'll take those minutes on one end of the floor. You talk about Ugo's development and how he could pan out once he does have an opportunity to get to the NBA. I think potentially after this season he may declare, or he may return for one more season. Offensively, not a ton to bring to the table, at least not in this setting yet. But defensively, I think that's going to carry him. I think that's going to carry his scouting report, and he's proving in the limited amount of action that he's gotten at the beginning of his season, not Kentucky season, but his season, that he can. He can protect the rim, and he can do that pretty consistently. So Bradshaw, Ugo, not the best nights offensively, but on the other end of the floor, I think they did pretty well for themselves. Rob Dillingham was also somebody that started this game off cold, missed his two three-point attempts, but finished 5 of 9 with 12 points. How about that windmill dunk at the end of this contest? Another solid player, Justin Edwards, 6 of 10 from the floor, 1 of 3 from 3, 7 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. Hey, look, I feel like every Wildcat we talked about tonight has had at least 2 steals. We will take a 60% shooting performance from Justin Edwards. It's not often that you see that, and he had his moments tonight. Also had a couple of missed opportunities, I thought, in transition, but at the same time, Kentucky really got out and ran and executed their offense pretty well in this game. I mean, 95 points and shooting almost 52% from the floor will produce that. You shot 50, almost 50, and then 81 in this game. So can't really get upset at that. You can't get upset at statistically what Louisville did outside of their point total at 76. I mean, overall, this was just a pretty dominant game from the Wildcats. Had some rebounds given up there late, even though Kentucky did end up winning the rebounding margin. They had 7 more fouls than Louisville, but I think that's just partially the nature of the offense and then just kind of how the game ended up flowing. Let's see here. Assist to turnover ratio, Louisville actually finished positive, even though they're negative on the season, which I find entertaining. Kentucky, 8 blocks to Louisville's 2, 9 steals to Louisville's 6. I mean, just across the board, it was pretty consistent domination from the Wildcats, and they had, 5 different guys in double figures here tonight. The only one that I've not mentioned yet was Reed Sheppard, who just continues to be efficient, 50% from the floor, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. He had 4 rebounds. He had 11 assists. Very quietly had 11 assists to 2 turnovers, and he also had 2 steals and a plus minus of, brace yourselves again, 27. Reed Sheppard in 27 minutes had a plus minus of 27, positive 27, largely due in part to the fact that he had 11 assists. That is mind-boggling, the production that any of these 4 guards can put out there on any given night. And if you get the distribution from Reed Sheppard, you get the rebounding from technically a guard like Justin Edwards, you get the scoring from a guy like Antonio Reeves, you get the dog from somebody like DJ Wagner, who finished 1 of 6 in this game and did not have a great offensive game all around. Very quiet night from DJ Wagner. You've got the ability to, night in and night out, survive most contests and compete in most contests because you have these 4 guys. You're not going to see, knock on wood, hopefully you're not going to see Kentucky get blown out at any point this season because they've got all of these different options of different players that can step up and make that play. Now, there will be nights where all of these guys are off, but they do so many different individual things well that when you put it together as the conglomerate, they're going to produce, they're going to compete, and they're going to stay in some games. So I want to talk about that actually for just a brief moment, just looking ahead one more time to the schedule and the momentum that the Wildcats could build. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel, because as the weather gets colder here, as the year winds down, NFL offers stay very hot over on FanDuel, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So you need to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. That is FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, wrapping up the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I think we've covered just about everything for the Wildcats, outside of maybe shout out to Dawe, who looked really solid. In only 13 minutes, plus minus of plus 22, that was second best on the team. I really do hope that Kentucky does not elect to dwindle Dawe's minutes down to where they are non-existent because Aaron Bradshaw is in this lineup. Because Bradshaw can be really good on both ends of the floor, and he is a very interesting cog in this machine that the Wildcats have built offensively. But Thiero has been good. He's been solid. Was 1 of 2 from 3. If you can get a 3-pointer per game, get 7 to 10 points from him, a very aggressive block. He almost killed a man on a dunk attempt. Had he been able to throw that down, that would have been awesome. I flew out of my chair for that one. I was expecting him to just absolutely just crush the rim. But anyway, point being, Dawe Thiero in these 13 minutes, solid. Give him some more opportunities. Give him some more touches. There are different things Kentucky can do with this rotation. Let's experiment a little. I say let's as if I have a choice in it. I don't. But Kentucky can experiment a little bit. I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see this momentum, this scoring effort continue. Because right now, Kentucky's got a chance over these next 4 games to make a statement entering SEC play. Now, what have we continued to say? It's going to be tough to beat Florida and Texas A&M on the road. It's going to be tough to beat Missouri at home. It's another SEC team, a decent SEC squad. You've got Illinois State to start things off. You can't overlook any contest on the schedule because of what happened just a few weeks ago with UNC Wilmington. But you would like to think that's a win. You would also like to think that Kentucky's got a legitimate shot to beat Florida. They should be favored in that game. It's going to be a tough out in Gainesville to open up SEC play, a legitimate crowd, a tough environment, a solid team, according to Ken Pom, an 8-3 record. By the way, Florida just beat Michigan and scored 106 points in the process, and 106-101 in overtime. A fun game. You can win that game. And if you do win that contest, Missouri at home, that is winnable. You can win that game by somewhere between 5 to 15 points. I think that's your range there. That's probably where it's going to finish. And then you go and you play Texas A&M. And that's the next loss that Ken Pom predicts for Kentucky. And I think I would actually say Florida is a more difficult game because of how offensively A&M has struggled to shoot the basketball to start this season. And I know from an offensive standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, they are currently top 5 in the country. But you don't like the 28% from 3. The 2-point percentage is average. They don't get to the foul line incredibly well. The only thing that they do insanely well is offensively they rebound the ball, which is going to be a nightmare for Kentucky to have to go up against. But still, if you can control that with your bigs, you have an opportunity. You have at least a chance to win that game. A pretty good chance, I would think, against a very good opponent. So these next 4 games, going to be tough, But if you build some momentum, if you win those first 3, you're looking at that A&M game and you're saying, okay, Kentucky, if you can prevent yourself from slowing down here, you can go on a tear. You can go on a very legitimate tear here. Watching that Arkansas game, by the way, January 27th, that one could be rough. But you've got the chance to do something special. Kentucky's got a chance to be a special team. They just have to string together some wins. And here we go. Let's see what happens. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below or hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and God bless.